I think that the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation is where we went from retro gaming into modern gaming. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Is it just because the consoles got powerful enough? Is it because we got to 1080p? Why do you think the shift was there?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Murph, as always, with my good friend, Cal.
It is me, Murph's good friend, Cal. I am here to talk about video games. Luckily, as always, I know my good friend, Murph, is ready to talk about video games.
Exactly. And today we're talking about two consoles that are near and dear to both our hearts. We're kind of going to be not exactly picking sides, but
It's more fun if we pick sides.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we're just both like, yes, how nice. Oh, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree.
These are both great consoles. We're going to say that up front. We like them both, but we are arguing for the sake of argument because isn't that what you do on the internet anyway?
Yep, it is time for episode 2 of the Console Wars. Gen 7 edition Xbox 360 versus PlayStation 3. We hear you. We hear you. Where is the Wii? Don't worry about it, okay?
The Wii was kind of just its own thing. It did its own thing.
Generation 6.75.
Yeah. Still had lots of great games, but the 360 and the PS3, I think, are a lot more comparable in terms of what they did. So I think that they're a little bit easier to compare. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, indeed. So since this is a console wars, we both have to take a side. I shall be fighting. And by fighting, I mean talking slightly more enthusiastically about the PS3, the PlayStation 3. Then Murph will be talking about the Xbox 360. But I think that's kind of just because even though we both like both consoles a lot, it's just kind of, we both have a bit more experience with one than the other.
Yes, I have more experience with the Xbox 360 because I ended up buying a 360 rather late. It was in either 2013, 2014, something like that. I got the Xbox 360E on Black Friday for a sale for $99. This was back when Black Friday deals were actually like good and people would actually like trample each other to get stuff. So it was really fun experience to go with a couple of friends and get that. But yeah, I got a 360 and that was not my first HD console because my first HD console was the Wii U.
Oh, of course, so, as one does, yes.
As one does.
The Gen 7.25 console.
Pretty much. But the Xbox 360 was my first experience to being able to have like all those games in the palm of my hand from the previous generation, because this was when the 8th generation of consoles was starting to go. So I was like, there's all these games that I've missed out on. So why not go through and play some of them? Because I had experienced a good bit of these like with friends over the years, things like that. But I wanted to be able to own a lot of these things for myself and just pick up some of the stuff that I hadn't experienced.
Yep. And that was pretty much the same boat for me with the PS3. I bought it around the same. I got my first PS3 around the same time as you got your first Xbox 360, Murph. It was 2013-ish. I was still in high school, and even then, the Xbox One, PS4 by then definitely out. But I was like, hey, I have the opportunity to pick up one of these for cheaper and experience some really cool games that I've heard all of my friends talking about 3 years ago.
That was another thing where this isn't really the case anymore, but what used to be the case was that when a new console came out, then the old console would just be on sale. They would sell it for cheap kind of everywhere. And unfortunately, the world we live in these days, that's not really a thing. Like a Nintendo Switch still just costs the same amount, even though the new one is coming out.
Yep.
But
the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series are getting more expensive.
Yeah, crazy. But that is a different topic.
Yes, exactly.
What about the 360, Cal? When did you first play the 360?
Oh, man, I first played the 360 right around I also played the PS3 originally well before I bought one myself.
True.
Xbox 360, PS3, I would say I had fairly consistent exposure to them throughout their lifetime just by going to such and such a friend's house. What are we going to do? We're going to play video games, obviously. They have a PS3. They have an Xbox 360. So that's what we were doing. Xbox 360 first exposure must have been pretty close to release time. And then, it's time to play some split screen online Call of Duty very poorly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, for me, it was didn't have much experience with PS3 until I bought it in like 2019, I think it was, where I was like, I'm just trying to fill out my collection and I don't have a PlayStation 3, so might as well. Was that similar for you with the 360?
Definitely. 1000%. It was just like, cool, I'll get it. Fill it out. Have fun.
Yeah.
Get to play some cool games.
So, both of these cool consoles. Let's talk a little bit about the history before we deep dive into like what they do well and poorly. So 360 came out in 2005, the fall of 2005. PS3 came out a year later in 2006. They did about the same commercially, which I find kind of interesting. The Xbox 360 sold 84 million units in its lifetime, and the PS3 sold 87 million. So for all intents and purposes, they did basically equal as far as like success.
Yeah, success wise, more and less equal. And it is funny to look at, a difference of 3 million sales and say that's pretty much equal, but they both sold so many, 3 million, that is less than 5% difference between the two. So, basically,
this is in addition to the Wii, which sold even more than that, which obviously we're not really talking about today, but there was a market for video game consoles and people wanted to buy them and play them.
People were buying them. And this is the same time when the PSP was selling a ton, same time when the DS was selling a ton, same time at some point 3DS came out, was selling a ton. All kind of within the life cycle of these consoles. And people were raring to play video games, man. I think it did help that for large portions of even during their normal life cycle, especially for the 360, these consoles could be gotten for pretty dirt cheap, which made it that much easier to pick it up, buy it, play games on it, that kind of stuff. I think even if we try to sit here and compare these, we had this like tale of the tape segment, during our first Console Wars episode, which you should go and listen to, where we can compare the Nintendo DS to the PSP. And when you're talking about Nintendo DS versus PSP, I think it's real easy to do a lot of compare, contrast. Oh, this has literally 2 screens. Oh, this one has a big screen. Oh, this one was this expensive. This one was perceived to be made for kids.
One has an analog stick, one doesn't.
Yes, exactly. Wherein like comparing and contrasting the 360 and the PS3 is actually kind of tough to do because they were 2 consoles made for the exact same purpose, which is, oh, cool, you can plug an HDMI cable into this one and it'll look nice.
They were targeting pretty much the same market as well.
Targeted to the exact same market. They had different controllers and they had a very limited selection of exclusives comparative to even the former generation. A lot of the iconic games that people talk about, even when they think about the PS3 or the Xbox 360, their personal experiences with them were AAA games that were very successful and were made for both consoles. We'll talk more about the games later, but even if we're talking about release dates, very close to each other, commercial performance, basically the same. Power, the PS3 was technically slightly more powerful or whatever, but was way harder for devs to work with because its architecture was so unique. It's so weird to compare and contrast them, but we can talk about their strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yeah, there's a few. Like you said, the Xbox 360 was more developer friendly. So I think this really helped with the games, especially early on. The fact that the Xbox 360 came out a year earlier, I think helped it a lot because it gave developers time to figure out how to use it and then start develop games for it. And then that made it so that it had a year head start on the PS3, which was really expensive on launch. It was $500 or $600 depending on the version that you got. So like people are complaining about $600 video game consoles now in the year of our Lord 2025. Think about that in 2006.
I don't want to think about 2006 money inflation numbers to today. That's got to be like $900+
Yeah, so the Xbox 360, especially early on, got a lot of developer support. And so people made a lot of very good games for the 360 early on, did them relatively quickly, and they often performed better. So I think that was definitely a plus of the 360.
Yep, and I definitely agree with that. The price was a huge factor, and it was way easier to work with. But in that same vein, I think like out of the gate, the PS3 had a huge technical advantage in that it was entirely built around using Blu-rays. It could read Blu-rays, which was kind of a really big deal at the time. Blu-rays were starting to take over as kind of the replacement for DVD technology at the same time. And much the same way, it's like, hey, you could get a Blu-ray player plus a video game player, much the same way that the PS2 helped break through DVDs into like home theater multimedia setups. Why get a DVD player when you could get a video game player plus a DVD player? You could get a Blu-ray player plus a video game player. And I'm pretty sure Blu-rays can hold more than whatever the Xbox 360 discs had going on them.
Definitely. A Blu-ray can hold 25 gigabytes for a single layer disc, and a DVD can hold 4.7.
Was the 360 still on plain old DVDs? Is that what plain they were working with? Okay. I wasn't sure if it was some crazy, Microsoft has invented a new cool form of DVD that lets it hold 6 more gigabytes, you know.
Nah, it was just a basic DVD-based system, because you were saying that the Blu-rays were starting to take over. It was still very, very early. It was
early, yeah.
Yeah, like people think that the DVD drive in the PS2, which definitely helped. It was like a symbiotic relationship for how DVDs were adopted so quickly and for how the PS2 got into people's living rooms. But I think that was a little bit later on in DVD's like overall development cycle than Blu-ray was, because Blu-ray, like a PS3 at $600 was still the cheapest Blu-ray player that you could get.
Which is insane, man.
Insane. So most people were not buying Blu-ray players at this point. And most people were not looking at the PS3 and saying, oh, well, I'll get that because it has a Blu-ray player and can play video games. Most people were looking at that and saying, that's way too expensive. I'm not going to buy that. DVDs are plenty fine. But yes, Blu-rays, they did not show their worth early on, but later on, then a lot of 360 games just start to have to come on to DVDs, or assets start to have to be compressed a little bit more. And so it gave it a little bit more longevity, I would say. One thing that I think the 360 did better is the controller. We did an entire tier list.
It's not a competition, man. It's really not.
We did an entire tier list on all the video game controllers that we've used from some of the biggest manufacturers of video game systems. So go check out that video if that sounds interesting. But we were both pretty high on the 360 controller because it's so good. It still is so good. It's wireless, one of the first like good wireless controllers. Dual analog setup just feels good, feels solid in the hand. Configuration is really nice. PS3 just has awful triggers, flexes in the hands. Yeah, it has rechargeable batteries, but so what if it doesn't feel good to use? It doesn't feel good to use. Like
I was about to say, I won't give you like the spoiler. I think you should go watch the definitive video game controller tier list video. Link in the corner, whatever. But I won't tell you where we landed. I will tell you that the PS3 controller, though, is 3 full tiers below the Xbox 360 controller. Well below. We don't love the DualShock 2, and it was just the DualShock 2, and they didn't really improve much of anything.
And made some things worse.
Let me tell you, Murph, something I really appreciated about the PS3 around that point of time was, and this is both the strength and the weakness of the PS3, I think, compared to the Xbox 360. I liked that the PS3 had free online infrastructure. Sony Online was free to use basically up until relatively recently, it feels like.
It was PS4.
Yeah.
So not actually all that recently.
No, not all that recently. Man.
Yeah.
Everything that happened was 2 years ago, man. That's all I got to tell you.
Definitely. Xbox 360, PS3, they came out 2 years ago, actually.
But I do remember like a lot of what seemed to define the life of Xbox 360 owners during especially the heyday was like, all right, how do I absolutely game the system so I can get 2 years of Xbox Live Gold for only $30 and all that kind of stuff. Just like hunting every single Black Friday sale, getting some kind of crazy combo crossover gift card thing. And on the PS3, it's just like, hey, it's a little bit worse, but you know what you don't have to do? Pay money.
Yeah, this is one where I would say that I just think that yes, you have to pay money, but the better experience like far outweighs the cost of things. Like It's so much more of a modern system, like the way that friends, invites, chats, all that stuff works on 360. The speed of everything is just so much faster. Everything's so much snappier. The UI, I think that money is well spent, given a much better user experience to people. And that's why I would say that the 360 is better. We are at a point where the points are pretty much moot. Like, it doesn't really matter now because there's not a ton of 360 games that you can still play online, or PS3 games for that matter. There's still some. Like, you can still pop in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and get into a match, which is pretty cool. They recently did like a server cleanup. There were a ton of hackers. Some of the hackers might have sneaked back in between the time that they did the cleanup. I think it was like about a year ago now. But it is like surprisingly competent of an online experience nowadays. But that's specifically for the Call of Duty games on the 360. And yeah, a lot of other stuff has just been shut down. So
no, definitely. Yeah, it is interesting to talk about the online infrastructure now for these two consoles, when like it mattered a lot a decade ago. Man, more than a decade ago. It mattered a lot 15 years ago. But now, no, pretty much not at all. I think like actually maybe relevant for that. I think one final thing in the modern era that I really enjoy about the PS3 is like comically easy to homebrew, what a lot of people call jailbreak, modify software wise. It is pretty much just as easy as preparing some files on your computer, put them onto a USB and starting up your PS3 after you've plugged the USB into it. That's about as easy as it gets. The 360, I'm not as familiar. From what I've heard, though, it is in a lot of ways some hardware modding or bust.
Depends on the version of the console that you get.
Sure.
But we'll talk about like the hardware and hardware revisions a little bit later. But for now, I want to talk about the games, because the games, I think, are what made this console generation great.
And it's also where it gets a little bit weird to try to compare and contrast these consoles too. I already teased it toward the top of the show, but obviously there are some awesome exclusives for each of these consoles, and we will talk about them. But it feels like by Gen 7 is when we were really settled into every existing AAA studio. Both of these consoles are similar enough, powerful enough, that every AAA studio, obviously, just for market share reasons, is going to release their games for both consoles. Or this was also an era of a lot of timed exclusives where it would be on only PlayStation for 6 months and then come out on the 360, or only the 360 for a year and then come out on the PS3. I think I almost count timed exclusives as reasonably exclusives. A year is a long time in video games, right? But so many of the most iconic, best, quote unquote, games of the console generation could easily be played on either console. But let's talk about our favorite exclusives first. Obviously, Murph, you're our 360 representative here. What were your favorite 360 games?
So you can't talk about the 360 without talking about Halo. Obviously, I cannot undersell how important this game / these few games, because it actually got a few Halo games. It got Halo 3, Halo Reach, and Halo 4. I think the importance of those kind of diminished as the games went on, because like Halo 3 was huge. I didn't play as much Halo 3 in its heyday. I played Reach a lot in its heyday. Same with 4, and I have a huge soft spot for 4. I know a lot of people that are Halo purists do not like 4.
It's a fun, it's different, but it's still a fun game.
It kind of Call of Duty-ified a lot of aspects of Halo, and people didn't really like that. Like, it made sprinting a thing, it gave people jetpacks and stuff. Like, Reach had both of those, but they were locked behind armor abilities, so you had to like start picking and choosing what you had to do. 4 had like loadouts. It had like score streaks from like you had in Call of Duty. So there were just so many aspects of Call of Duty that made it into that game.
And I think a lot of people, in addition to all of those changes, I think a lot of people would like call it a bit of a spiritual directional shift, because it was the first major Halo title that was not developed by Bungie. It was developed by 343, now called Halo Studios.
Yeah, they have completely bungled the Halo franchise, but that is neither here nor there. As far as these three games go, these are fantastic games that sold a lot of systems. There were so many great nights played split screen with people, plenty of online matches played here. Like, I used to go over to a buddy's house and we would system link and play Halo Reach, and that's just what we would do. And we had a grand old time playing that. Gears of War is another great one. I played 3 the most, but I do like all of them. I don't think I've actually played 2. I've played 1 and 3. I do have 2, but haven't really played it. I had weird going through the Gears of War games. I played 3 and then 1 and then not 2. So what happens in the middle of the story? I don't know.
Who knows? But man, that's a lot of monster blood.
Yeah, you're not really playing Gears for the story. You're playing it for like, dang, everything looks so cool and it's so intense. But yeah, I liked the online of this quite a bit as well. Not as much as Halo, but the Gears games are quite good, and it is a little sad that all Epic does now is Fortnite, because Gears was really nice. PGR3, Project Gotham Racing, is my personal favorite racing game on the 360. This was a launch title. I like the Project Gotham Racing games because they're a little bit more arcadey than the Forza games, and yeah, pretty much just that. They kind of dwindled out, and Forza took the limelight as far as like the premier racing game on the 360, but just wanted to give a shout out to PGR3. And Ninja Gaiden 2, obviously talked about quite a little bit, but that's one of my favorite action games on the 360. So yeah, I just want to say that again. It's good. I like it. Those are my favorite games on the 360.
Those are all really solid games. And I think like Gears of War, I gotta say, is like, I think the series that I associate with the 360 specifically the most. Like,
definitely.
We had Halo games on the original Xbox. We had it on the Xbox One. We even had stuff like Halo Infinite on the X and S. Gears of War, sure, there was there's technically some games on the Xbox One and X and S, but I feel like its cultural moment, its popularity, its best games were Gear on the 360. I feel like that is the 360 series to me.
Yes, because the first one came out in 2006, and that was like the perfect moment to say, hey, this is what next generation gaming is. Check this out. You cannot do this on the previous generation. And it got a lot of people to jump ship to the 360.
Yep. No, definitely. So my favorite Xbox 360 games, you mentioned the Forza games as having bumped out PGR as kind of the Microsoft 360 racing games. Man, I love Forza Horizon on the 360. I love every Forza Horizon. Yeah, Horizon 1. All of the Forza games in general, just a big blast on the 360. That's like my kind of racing game. I have a lot of fun with it. BioShock, I'm going to call it a 360 game because it was a timed exclusive. Awesome series. Original BioShock timed exclusive on the 360. Sure, why not? Fable 2. Man, what a flawed video game, but what a fun, weird 3D Western RPG game going on there. Original Saints Row. Man, Saints Row.
I've only played Saints Row 2, but yeah,
sure,
Saints Row is really cool.
Saints Row is just such a funky... It really just feel like they just went with the prompt. Like, what if all of the parts of Grand Theft Auto that people actually interact with was cranked up to 15 and then you get Saints Row. Mass Effect series, obviously, as well. 360 exclusive for a relatively long time. I think a lot of people kind of forget about that. Especially the first game. Mass Effect, I love all 3 of those games. I don't care about the ending. I had a blast the whole time. Why not have a whole ton of fun? Great series. Controversial opinion. I was going to say uncontroversial opinion. Controversial opinion, number 1 remains my first. My favorite. That's probably a discussion for another day. But a really, really big strength game-wise of the 360, I feel, was the Xbox Live Arcade. Which just had so many sick games on it. I think
Castle Crashers.
Yeah, Castle Crashers, I think, was the original like Xbox Live Arcade like killer app. That a lot of people had a lot of fun with. And then like obviously these weren't like console exclusive in that you could also get them on PC and that kind of stuff, but like Super Meat Boy, Fez, that kind of stuff. super sick games. I think like there was an Alan Wake game, like the original Alan Wake game or a Alan Wake game was on there. Xbox Live Arcade generalized about as good as it gets for the 360. Unfortunately, it is now like hard to impossible to get those games legally on the 360 now
because the store has been shut down.
Store has been shut down. Yep.
So it is only the stuff that is still backwards compatible for the Xbox Series X and S that you can still get, and you have to buy those on. I guess you don't have to buy those on the newer generation of consoles. Actually, I don't know. I haven't checked that.
Yep. I haven't checked that either. Now that you think about it, I'll have to check it out sometime. But those are my favorite 360 games. And man, I would say we don't have a lot of exclusives here, but man, these are some killers, especially like Halo 3, Gears of War.
What do you mean? These are all exclusives. I pretty much all exclusives.
Up top, I said that we didn't have a lot of exclusives to talk about. But now we're talking about a lot of exclusives and they all rule.
They're so good. Oh, I love the 360.
Arcade, I feel like, to me, Live Arcade was like the big differentiator games wise in between the two, even if we discount, there's some really good series, some really good games exclusive. Live Arcade felt like something uniquely really cool games wise about the Xbox. Just get these indie titles in here, man. It's time.
Yeah. It basically I don't want to say created the indie genre, but basically gave a space for indie games to exist at all in the console space, which I think is super awesome.
I agree.
What about your PS3 games, Cal? I say the 360 is so good, but PS3, what about those exclusives?
So to me, the PS3 is the home of the best games all made directly by Sony's studios themselves. For, I think, like the highest level stuff, it's got to be the Uncharted series, obviously. If the 360 was not dominated, but I think like defined by one series that was kind of contained to itself. If Gears of War was that for the 360, it feels to me like the Uncharted series was that for the PS3.
It kind of shows like what each was good at. Like the 360 was oftentimes seen as the shooter box. That is where its bread and butter was. Whereas with the PS3, its bread and butter was single player, kind of big action, high budget games.
Yes, exactly. And so Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 all released on the PlayStation 3. I think Uncharted 4 was a PS4 game, right? Yeah, it had to have been, yeah.
Yes.
But those, I mean, especially Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, feels like such an iconic game of the era to me. And yeah, these were real set PC the people debating, am I really playing much of a game here compared to a lot of previous games, wandering around, trying to figure stuff out, maybe a bit of a slower pace. Interestingly enough, I didn't end up playing the Uncharted series of games on the PlayStation 3. I didn't play them until I got a PS5 and they gave me all of them for free. And I went back I went back and played them and I was like, wow, these are sick.
I have the first 3 games sitting on my shelf, just waiting to be played, waiting for a moment. That is in my backlog. Yep. So
they do feel like, definitely, especially in the first one, man, does that feel like a video game that came out in 2007.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, it's
personally.
not a bad thing.
I
it's
love
not a
games
bad,
that came out in 2007.
It's not a bad thing per se at all. But I think the next game up on my list, it's become iconic at this point in time. It's become almost memed upon how much has been released. Last of Us, I think, was a big step forward for narrative in games. AAA games that played a different way, felt a different way. I really enjoyed playing Last of Us. Little Big Planet, another one for me, kind of almost the original console seller. Out of the gate, it feels like, for the PS3, a lot of like puzzle platforming, but it focused a ton on user generated content, which was so sick. Getting to build your own platforms, getting to build your own levels, sharing them with other people, playing other people's levels. All of that kind of stuff is just super cool ideas that we hadn't seen that much of yet, obviously, because this was extremely early in the larger online infrastructure on console gaming, kind of era, if you will. And Little Big Planet took a lot of advantage of that. And then the Ratchet and Clank games on the PS3. Always fun.
Yeah, Ratchet and Clank Future. Yeah, Little Big
Yep.
Planet, I think, to me, is one of those franchises that has just kind of been forgotten.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like there was Sackboy's Big Adventure.
Sackboy's Big Adventure on the PS5, which is fun. It's a good game,
It's like great, but that's not Little Big Planet.
And it feels, yeah, and even from a guy who loves 3D platformers, it's like fine. It's a fine game. It's not a great game. Original Little Big Planet 2, even Little Big Planet on the PSP, awesome games all. But it is another franchise that, I mean, even Uncharted at this point, kind of forgotten. Little Big Planet, kind of forgotten. Ratchet and Clank, there is technically a really cool Ratchet and Clank game on the PS5. Also kind of feels like a franchise that was almost forgotten. It was kind of forgotten for the PS4 era. And then they made a new big one on the PS5. And it came out at the time when comically and memed upon, no one owned a PS5. It was the game on the PS5.
Yeah, they did like the PS4 reboot / hybrid remake. It was weird for the PS4 at the very end of its life, and then the PS5 one as well. So that one is definitely the least dead out of all of those.
Oh, for sure.
Just with the amount of game development time, or the amount of time that game development takes, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see Ratchet and Clank games. But the rest of these, it's like, well, Naughty Dog is working on other things. We know they're working on other things right now, not the Uncharted series. So if we'll ever see another one of those,
porting
great.
Last of Us and Last of Us 2 for a 50th time. Ba, 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 ba.
Wow.
Wow. They've also forgot about Uncharted. Ba, 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 ba.
Wow. Yeah, those are solid picks. I think my favorite PS3 games, definitely God of War. I love God of War on the PS3 and the PS2 for that matter. I'm a huge fan of old style God of War because they are just great 10-hour long action romps where the story is there, it's fun, it doesn't have to be super deep, you don't need a super deep connection with your son. I do like that
Boy.
games. to be fair, I can't really crap on that.
It is so crazy that the first God of War trilogy spawned the other two God of War games a decade down the line, because they are so thematically different.
Because the first three games are just like all about rage.
Yeah, just going crazy,
just going absolutely.
And then
ballistic.
the other two are about dealing with what happens after you've been such an angry man for such a long time. They are thematically connected, Murph.
There you go. They kind of are. But yeah, as far as like from a gameplay perspective, they're not really all that similar. You hit things and that's about the same. But yeah, I really like 3. I really like Ascension. A lot of people, when Ascension came out, that was like in 2013, and people were like, yeah, this formula feels tired. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. But at the same time, it's still a really good game.
Yeah, it's still just fun. It's really just silly and dumb and fun.
Yeah. The other one I would say that I played the most of on the PS3 as far as exclusives go is Metal Gear Solid 4. This game was one that I played relatively recently, like 4 years ago, when I was doing my first playthrough of the Metal Gear Solid games. And this one was the one where I actually felt like the gameplay clicked and the gameplay was good. But then the cutscenes just ended up being ridiculously long. And I liked that because I did like the story. I did like that it was a culmination of kind of basically everything that's happened up to this point. So it felt pretty fitting. It felt thematic. And it was a good ending to the franchise. Spoiler alert, it is kind of the ending of those games. But yeah, I like that quite a bit.
No, I definitely 100% agree. I mean, I haven't played Metal Gear Solid 4 in a second.
It's not one where there's not actually that much game to go back to, which is kind of weird.
Why do you say that?
Because there's so much. It's like literally half watching cutscenes and half gameplay, and there's only like 5 chapters.
Sure.
Of gameplay.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I guess I'll have to never play it again.
Sorry.
No!
Wow.
So I think this is the point where we have to talk about the elephant in the room if we're trying to compare and contrast these consoles in relation to games. I've already mentioned it 3 times on the show already. The best games of this generation, or at least like the most popular games of the generation, are just readily available on both platforms. Grand Theft Auto 4 and 5. Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, much more notably Arkham City. Arkham City maybe one of the most critically beloved games of the entire genre. Talking of critically beloved games of the genre, you have to talk about Elder Scrolls Oblivion. You have to talk about Elder Scrolls Skyrim. You have to talk about Red Dead Redemption. Of course, there's all of the Call of Duty games, which were far and away the most successful monetarily of any of this type of stuff. And it didn't matter what console you were on. If you wanted to play Skyrim, if you wanted to play Red Dead, if you wanted to play the latest Arkham title, it didn't matter what you had. You could just play it. And obviously that was also a thing like in Gen 6, but much less than it feels like it is in Gen 7. I feel like the consoles came out close enough to each other. The consoles were technologically powerful enough in concert with each other. There were like more and more of, I guess, more and more buy rates of these consoles, such that you would be missing out on more and more of a market if you just skipped out on one. That it feels like, and maybe I'm just wrong, the vibes just feel like we have less exclusives to deal with here. And even if we look at like the exclusives of this generation, it is pretty much just like Xbox 360 exclusives developed by a studio owned by Microsoft.
No, I think you're definitely right, but I think a lot of it was a product of the 360 just being an early adopter,
Sure,
or being very early adopted by people, and because of that, a lot of games that were planned for PS3
ended up getting also put on the 360 because it was so easy to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you had games, even games that were specifically developed for the PS3, like say Final Fantasy 13, also came out on the 360. There were games like Devil May Cry 4, where the developer Capcom was like, hey, well, if we want to sell as many copies of this as possible, let's put this traditionally PlayStation exclusive game out on the 360 as well. That, like Resident Evil 5 came out on the 360 and the PS3. Did not hit Xbox in the slightest last generation. So I think, yes, you are right that there was that shift, but it was, I think, due to changing market conditions in, hey, we just have to put this thing on as many things as possible in order to make it work for the rising costs of games, because we just want people to buy our games. And this was a point in time where games just started being more and more and more expensive to make, and developers and publishing studios, I don't think, were quite ready for the financial burden that some of these would take.
No, definitely. And this is where games started getting really expensive to make.
Yes.
That's a really big factor. You're right about that one, Murph.
Yeah, I think that the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation is where we went from, it's hard to say, but I think retro gaming into modern gaming. If you look at the games at the very beginning of the 360 and the PS3's life cycle, they felt like old games. Games at the end of the life cycle feel like new modern games that could have come out last year.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely would agree. I mean, Murph.
Yeah.
Is it just because the consoles got powerful enough? Is it because we got to 1080p? Is it because we were finally on like the third generation of 3D game iteration and ideation? I mean, why do you think that why do you think the shift was there? Have we had less creativity?
No, I think it's kind of all those factors. Like, you had a ton more power. You had a longer console life cycle than had happened in the past. Because, like, if you think the previous one, it was the first thing to come out was the PS2 in 2000, and then the console generation was basically 2005 was the last hurrah for it. So like 5 years, pretty much. The original Xbox was on the market as Microsoft's premier flagship video game product for 4 years, right? 2001 through 2005, and in 2005 it was taken over by the 360, which is insane.
That's so short, man. I can't.
It's so short.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that.
The 360 was on the market for 8 years before the Xbox One took it over. That's twice as long. So you have twice as long to get familiar with the video game consoles themselves, with designs, and just figuring out what works and pushing that to its absolute limits. And I think that really lets games mature I think that's probably the best way to put it, is that this is the console generation where games matured.
And it is fascinating. Like, it matured, and probably a big part of that too is it was around for so long that we did get to see full series come and go. Like, there were 3 Uncharted games released. We had 2 Halo games released. We had a ton of Gears of War games. And it's not like they were rushed out. You could come out with a game every 2.5 to 3 years and comfortably get 3 games out for a series in the console's life cycle, which is kind of nuts.
It's such a good sweet spot for gaming too, because nowadays, making a AAA game just takes so many years to make. So I think this is such a good in-between of, yes, the graphics are not technically as good as they are now, but they're still in HD. They're like 720p. They're not even really pushing 1080p most of the time.
No.
But they are modern enough that you will not be missing a lot of quality of life features, and yet you are still going to get so many good gaming experiences all on this single generation.
Yep. I definitely agree, Murph. I think it's time for us to move on to talking about, obviously, the most important things that you could do with your PlayStation 3 and your Xbox 360, which is playing your older retro video games on it that you have collecting dust around your home. This is
we actually hate 360 and PS3 games. We're actually going to play other games on it instead. Good idea, Cal.
Hey, backwards compatibility is always worth talking about, especially since if you are a game collector, almost assuredly you have some amount of other games from a previous generation laying around, and hey, maybe maybe you just want to play them, I think we could just talk about this really quick. The PS3, the original, the fat PS3 is what people call it, launch model, literally just had the hardware of the PlayStation 2 pretty much in it, and it was 1-to-1 more or less backwards compatible with the PlayStation 2. In addition to the PlayStation 1, all consoles, all PlayStation 3s, software emulate all PlayStation 1 games. The PlayStation 2, you would have to have that very original launch model of the PlayStation 3, which that's so funky looking at them, man. They break at the drop of a hat. They have so many extra ports that you have never heard of in your life on them. It's insane. Look at the back of a launch PS3. They're nuts.
Yeah. Did you know that those things can hook up to a printer?
Printing out my screenshots of PlayStation 3 gameplay on my direct line to a printer from my launch PS3. I love Sony.
Yeah, but the backwards compatibility for the PS3 is just so weird, because I don't think most people even remember that you can play PS1 games on them. Like, you can take a PlayStation 1 disc, stick it in, and it just works.
We talked about this ahead of time, Murph. I literally just I traded, I eventually got my hands on a launch PS3 because it's the quote unquote best PS3 to have, right? Maybe. We'll talk more about that later, but I just wanted to have one. I wanted to have a fat PS3. And part of that was because in my mind, I could also play the PlayStation 1 games on it. Stupid. I could play my PlayStation 1 games on my wife's PS3 Slim. Easy.
Yeah, you can do it. You can download digital versions of a lot of the best PlayStation 1 games as well. Like, the PlayStation 3 is a surprisingly good PlayStation 1 machine. So it's got that going for it. The Xbox 360 is also, I would say, just as weird.
It is
the way that it
very
handles
weird.
Backwards compatibility. Because it plays original Xbox games, but it's completely done through software. Because the hardware in the Xbox 360 and the original Xbox are two completely different things. One's x86 based, one's PowerPC based. They are not compatible at all. The 360 basically just brute forces the emulation for the original Xbox, which, yes, the 360 is powerful, but it's not that powerful, meaning there's a lot of emulation issues when you run the original Xbox games. So it can play about, I want to say, half of the original Xbox's library.
And because of that, because they did have to do like specific software work to make a lot of these games work, upon launch, the number was a lot closer to like a bit above what I want to say was like 160s of the original Xbox games. And then by the end, when they finally released like the last batch, it was 462. So the amount of backwards compatible games like grew over the life cycle of the Xbox, which is also kind of how we see things working now as well with Xbox still to this day.
That's true. I guess it's not that weird because Xbox still kind of just does this, and this is how they do backwards compatibility, but they didn't do that great of a job back then.
No. But they do a way better job now than they had in the past.
Yes, but unfortunately, there's not as many games for the original Xbox that you can play on the Series X.
Yep.
Nowadays.
And
so
but I think it feels weird because outside of Xbox also doing this on, I mean, I guess their last two consoles as well. Their newest one in the Xbox One as well. That was also kind of how it was handled. The other two console manufacturers that has been very much either like, yeah, you plug it in and it works, or sorry.
Yeah,
in their way of handling things. Not like, hey guys, it's a new quarter. We've added 14 new 360 games to the list of games that you can put a disc into the Xbox Series and it'll just work.
Well, you would still always have to like download a patch for whenever they added stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, so which one wins as far as like better backwards compatibility?
I mean, I think in my mind, I think the Xbox wins out at least a little bit because last generation availability, specifically of previous generation backwards compatibility, I think matters a lot, especially to the average consumer in the time who is grabbing this. Maybe they want to easily be able to play their games from the last generation. With the Xbox 360, sure, put it in there, see if it works, see if it doesn't. If you didn't have a launch PS3, fat luck, buddy. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. The PS1 even then was pretty retro, and PS1 games and being able to play PS1 games is still good to have. But yeah.
Now I'll take the PS3 any day of the week, baby. It's time to play Final Fantasy VIII. I don't care about any of those PS2 games. I don't care about any of those original Xbox games. I want to play Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics on my HD television on my PS3. PS3 wins. Murph, you lose. Sorry, everyone. Okay. And now it's time to talk about our recent pickups.
Hear me out. So the PSP also plays PS1 games. So now this has turned into an Xbox 360 versus PS3 versus PSP. PSP wins because it plays PS1 games. Thoughts? Yeah.
Murph, how does collecting for these consoles work?
Okay, so these are actually like ridiculously easy to collect for because most of the games are just comically cheap. Because a lot of these games are still on digital storefronts, not all, but that keeps their price to a maximum that you can possibly put them to. Because once people are like, oh, well, I can just buy that game digitally and it'll be cheaper, that just kind of caps the price on those. And there were a ton of these things sold.
I was about to say,
for both the 360 and the PS3.
A lot of these most popular games, like we said, we sold 80 million plus of each of these consoles. That means a lot of, especially the most in-demand games out there, a lot of people would have bought them. And everyone, owned a copy of such and such a game. And then over time, you'll still see a lot of like Facebook Marketplace postings or whatever of some guy being like, finally getting rid of my 360 games. And it's Skyrim, Arkham City, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto, all the sports games, just like all the stuff that you maybe would want to play, all the best stuff and also all the bad stuff, just all there. And he wants $40 for all of it. And that's really cheap.
Yeah, pretty much. And there's so many titles out there and they're very rarely expensive. When they are, it is usually because they're licensed games and they've been pulled from digital storefronts because of licensing issues. So like the Spider-Man Web of Shadows, the Transformers Cybertron games, those are like, I don't know, like $90-ish at the most right now, I want to say. So because of that, there's not much that's like actually triple digits as far as video games that you can buy on these systems. Do they exist? Yeah, but not anything that you actually want to play, I would say.
And in that same vein, they're kind of weird consoles to collect for, like in a quite literally, if you're like me, insert collection of my GameCubes, right? All of the special edition of the GameCubes. There's not that many, like there's, you can get a silver PlayStation 3. Ooh, you can get a white PlayStation 3, which is kind of rare and was only in Japan. Ooh, there's some bundles that just add a PlayStation 3 in them and you didn't get anything special, right? And it's just like, in the Xbox itself, there's some really rare PS3s out there, but in the Xbox, it's like, cool, you could get the Gears of War 3 edition. You could get, I know there's several different, I think there's like a Modern Warfare 3 edition. There's both Halo Reach and Halo 4 and ODST different editions, and there's a really cool Star Wars one.
Yeah, there's the RTX Star Wars one. That's probably the coolest one.
That's like, yeah, as far as commercially released cool 360s for you to like collect, there's like sub 10 of them. And then, of course, you go down the rabbit hole and yeah, you can get the 2 different Taco Bell 360s that there are 10 of each and blah, 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 blah. A lot more of that kind of stuff does exist. But if you're just like, cool, I love the 360. I would like to own several cool 360s. There are options, but not that many. And for the PS3, there's basically none.
Yeah. But it is pretty interesting because I think this console generation is probably the console generation that just has the most revisions of consoles.
Yeah.
So assuming you want to get one of these things now, you might not even have to because like we've been saying, the Xbox One/Series X plays a lot of 360 games. So a lot of these best 360 games that you could potentially want to play, you might not even need a 360 in order to play them or start a physical 360 collection. PS3, that's not really the case. You need a PS3 to play PS3 games, is what it is. You could technically do like the cloud streaming service to stream PS3 games, but who wants to do that? We don't. You probably don't either.
No, definitely not. No, definitely
so,
not.
Cal, walk me through the different PS3s that you can get. You had mentioned that the launch model is the fat one that has I think it's 4 USB ports on the front. That's what plays the PS2 games, PS1 games. Why would or would you not want that? And what other options are there?
So, I mean, the original one, it is pretty cool just for the sake that you can get the original PS2, obviously. However, it has a really small hard drive in it. I think it's 20 gigs. Ugh. Maybe you could get a 60 gig module, but it has weaker Wi-Fi in it than some of the other ones do. It's definitely something you want to plug into your Ethernet cable if you've got one. But it is just like, it's a PS3. It's huge. It's unwieldy. You're not going to be able to fit it vertically into a lot of like video game slots or like multimedia player slots on like entertainment centers. If that's a consideration, it is shockingly tall. And then, but the slim model, it comes in like 120 minimum. Awesome. Much better. 120 gig hard drive. It's slimmer. Obviously it uses less power, which is fascinating. It's pretty dang quiet. It fits into smaller places, thus the slim. I think like the slim is basically like the de facto, PlayStation 3 in that like, it looks like a PS3. It doesn't play PS2 games. It'll play your PS3 games. It'll fit into a solid little spot. But man, if you want to talk about a quirky video game console, the PlayStation 3 Super Slim, if you want the PlayStation 3 that is the weirdest, you should get the Super Slim. Like the PlayStation,
it's so weird.
The PlayStation 3 is weird if you look at the back and see how many weird ports on it that you've never seen before and will never see again. Like on it, cool. That's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that it's that tall. The Slim, it's just the PlayStation 3. It is the definitive PlayStation 3. The Super Slim, it has a ridged top with like a release top that comes back and you put the disc directly in it, kind of almost like a CD player.
It's the weirdest top loading mechanism I think I've ever seen,
and it works so poorly. It's so
that's the worst
bad.
part.
It's so bad at staying closed
because it's like a little clip that could just get broken so easily.
Yep. Exactly. But you could get it with like up to 500 gig hard drive. They just kept making them bigger and bigger and bigger. But it is so funny. In college, my buddy James had the super slim PS3, and that's kind of what we played around our dorm room. And I would just get so frustrated with the sliding disc cover.
It's so stupid.
Much. It's so bad. But the ridged top look is kind of nice, actually. I kind of like the way that the top looks, but
it just feels so cheap.
Yes, because the whole thing does very much. All of them are made out of plastic, right? It feels like it's made out of cheap plastic. So if you're gonna get a PS3, unless you're a weirdo like me and are somewhat attracted to the very end of life cycle, getting as many dollars as we can out of every PS3 revision, like the Super Slim, much like I have a love affair with the Wii Mini.
Because it's weird.
I have a love affair with the PS3 Super Slim. You should get a PS3 Slim unless you are very specifically concerned with playing your PS2 discs. Then you should go out of way to get a fat. It's pretty much that simple. How about the 360, Murph?
One thing that's you neglected to mention is the fats love to yellow light of death.
That is correct.
So they're not the most reliable things in the world, which is why I have a Slim, and the Slim is my PS3 daily driver. If I'm going to play a PS3 game, it's going to be on a regular Slim. Now, that being said, I can't believe we made it this far without talking about the 360 red ring of death.
Oh, I know.
This was a blight on the 360 for a lot of its lifespan. It just caused so many issues. It was like I think it was like a 50% hardware failure rate, which is insanity.
Yeah, which is big time nuts.
That is crazy. Microsoft lost like $2 billion on refurbishments and repairs for these things because they were like, yep, we will eat the cost of it because we need to make sure that our consumers are like, yeah, we trust you to take care of the problem. And good on them for doing that, because otherwise I don't know if there would be an Xbox brand to speak of if they didn't do that. But that means that the original Xbox 360 fats, you probably don't want. You can get them. There's a bunch of different board revisions, but the earliest board revisions are the ones that are most prone to it. Those are not the greatest anyway, because they don't actually have HDMI.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. Huh.
Yeah, the original 360s were component only.
Huh. That's kind of sick, though. It's kind of cool.
It's kind of cool, but you probably want HDMI
much
output,
less functional.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, you can actually look on the back of 360s and they'll say the date of manufacture. And so you want one that was manufactured, I want to say past 2007, probably in like 08 or 09. You're more likely to get a Jasper board, which is the best board, the best motherboard of the old fat models. Those are the least likely to red ring. I have one that I use as like a secondary 360. I've had it for like 10 years, never had a problem with it. It's not my daily driver, so there's that. But yeah, I love the way that the fats look, though. The fats look so slick. They're so cool looking. And one cool thing about the 360 that is better than the PS3 that we forgot to mention is it has removable hard drives.
That's true. That it do.
So the PS3, you can also remove the hard drive, but it's a little bit more of a pain in order to do so. With 360, very easy. Yeah, so there's that. Then the S is probably the one that you should go for. I also have an extra S. It had a dead disk drive for a while. I finally got it repaired. So now it works. It works great, but I don't actually use that as my primary one because I use the E because that's the one that I got for Black Friday, and it's worked great ever since. It is technically the cheapest of all of them, but it works fine. It works great. It has a physical button. You press the physical button, the disk drive opens. You have a physical power button that you have to actually push in. I don't know. I just like the actual physical buttons. It feels good to me, and it has the smallest power draw of all the 360s. It is the hardest to mod, though, so definitely don't get an E if you're looking to mod things. I would say get a Jasper Board 360 Fats or an S. You can look some stuff up because I haven't actually modded 360s ever, so don't come to me saying, hey, how do I mod one of these? Because the answer is I don't actually know. But yeah, you can't go wrong with either the S or the E. You can go wrong with the Fats. Just make sure you look at the back and check that date. And even that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a Jasper board. You have to look at the pins of the power supply. Also, if you have a 360 and you're looking for a power supply, that is also a game of chance because the original 360 had like 3 different power supplies.
I know.
They don't all work together.
I was going to say, I picked up a relatively like good deal, like 360 a while back. It was an earlier one, and it just had the most impossible to get power. It was like missing the power supply. I was like, perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was like the weirdest, hardest to get power supply. And I was like, well, okay.
Yeah. One fun thing that you can do with the power supply, though, is one time when I was playing Halo Reach with my friends, one of the guys had the Halo 3 Special Edition 360. And what you can do, so the Red Ring of Death just denotes general hardware failure, right? It just means something is not connecting, ergo I cannot boot. I cannot do the thing that I need to. But what you can do with the power supply is that you can like kind of unplug the plug just a little bit and get it to the point where it is receiving enough power to get the lights on, but not enough for it to actually post, not enough for it to actually boot. So one time we were playing Halo, and then our friend who had the 360 was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. And so me and my friend were like, what if we prank this guy and think his 360 red ringed? So we go in and then we like ease out the power supply, and then we press the button, turn on the 360, and it just red rings. And so he comes out and he's like, we're like, dude, I'm so sorry. Your 360, we don't know what happened. It just did this. And he's like, no, not my special edition 360. No. We let him go for like 30 seconds before we're like, no, it's all fine. It's all fine. It's just a joke. But man, he was like devastated for all of 30 seconds.
Oh, I'm sure. It's about as devastating as it gets, man.
Yeah, that was a mean prank looking back.
Oh,
but
sure.
Still fun. Yeah. Anyway, the overall Xbox 360 versus PS3. How do we feel about this head-to-head, Cal? Like you've been saying many, many times that the games feel very much the same. I think one thing that differentiates these two that we have not touched on is the fact that the 360 was more successful early on, and then when the Kinect came out, then they started to do a bunch of casual stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I'm surprised we made it this far without talking about the Kinect.
Sure, yeah.
But I've never really had much exposure with the Kinect anyway. I would not say it's a particular plus. Like, you can play Kinect Adventures on it. Sure, cool, whatever. Dance Central. Have a great time with it. Enjoy yourself. But the 360 kind of just focused on casual experiences at, I don't want to say the wrong time, because before we started this, we were like, well, what's the best-selling 360 game? It's actually Kinect Adventures.
Which is insane, man.
Which is insane.
It's not that surprising. It was a pack-in past a certain point in time. You know, you just get a 360. It comes with a Kinect. It's the pack-in for that. Cool.
But even so, there was definitely demand for it. And so it didn't come out at the wrong time, but it came out at the wrong time for trying to win the console war and trying to get the core gaming crowd. And that philosophy kind of carried over into the Xbox One. And that has kind of haunted Microsoft ever since.
Yep.
Like, they have not shaken the Kinect days, which sucks.
I do think another thing you can kind of look at a little bit is that, like, I think if you compare, like, when the, like, heavy hitter exclusives kind of came out too, like, Last of Us came out a little later in the PS3 life cycle, you know?
Yeah, it was 2013. That was the same year that the PS4 came out.
Exactly. Like, maybe the heaviest hitter of the PS3 exclusives came out at the very end. I have to imagine that sold a lot of PS3s, right? If people hadn't had one yet, right? And
yeah, I believe there's a bundle with it at a certain point.
There was, yeah. And, you know, I don't want to say it was all exclusives or something, but I feel like that had to deal a pretty big deal with it too. Like, at the same time when the 360 was going more and more casual, the PS3 was like, hey, here's Uncharted 3. Hey, here's The Last of Us. Hey, how about that Metal Gear Solid 4? You know? Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 4, I would say, was actually the thing to kick off that. And then Uncharted 2 was like a big one-two punch of like, oh, got it.
Yep.
The PS3 is actually, it means business, because we had those games, and then we had God of War 3 in 2010, and then Uncharted 3 in 2011, Last of Us in 2013. And there were just all of these games that just kept hitting over and over and kept giving people reasons to buy a PS3 over a 360. And even though the 360 came out way hotter than the PS3, everyone thought that the PS3 was going to be a flop a couple of years into the life cycle of it. But to Sony's credit, they turned it around. Like the Slim was basically a whole new system, because that kind of came out and was like, all right, here we go. This is going to be our new marketing push. You get all these new cool games. We have a new lower price. The system looks different and it's sleeker. It's got a matte black finish, and it just felt like a new beginning for the console. So like, if you ask me, the PS3 basically came out in like 2008, 2009. Because those first couple of years were just so rough.
I think that's a much more appropriate. Like the Slim came out and then the PS3 became a real thing, I think is a very real assessment of everything.
Whereas the 360 was the opposite, where it came out of the gate hot. It was fire. And then by the time like 09 rolled around, then that fire was starting to dwindle. And that's why like the PS3 did technically eventually overtake it in sales, which is crazy that they were able to turn around that much.
Well, here's the thing, Murph. I think the PS3 was more powerful. Eventually, it was just as accessible. It had maybe some better, more iconic games. All points in its favor. However, it had perhaps the worst controller ever put into a box for a retail, high-level consumer console. So I think we'll have to call it a draw.
You know what? That's fair. So I think that's about all we're going to talk about the Xbox 360 versus PS3 for today. So let's go on to our one recurring segment of the show, recent pickups. I don't think I've ever said that. I think usually you say that.
I was going to say, I think I pretty much always am the one that pulls us into that one. So
I don't like it.
I guess that means I go first.
You go first.
I get to show up first. I always throw it to you. So, hey, it's me. You know what it's going to be. We got a GameCube controller. I got the chance to pick up like a new in-box Super Smash Bros. Controller from Japan. Which is neat. That's where you get them these days if you want them. So
the English ones are exactly the same, except for the box.
Yeah, the box
and they're more expensive. So why would you get them?
And for those who don't know, these are especially nice for GameCube heads out there because the original GameCube controller had a 6-foot cable on it, and these ones have a 9-foot cable on it, and it turns out a 50% increase actually is a great amount of length to add to a controller. It is really the difference in between like, oh man, I kind of have to lean forward a little bit to not have a lot of tension on this, to like, oh yeah, I can sit anywhere I want in relation to the TV while still using the GameCube. So happy to add a second one of these to my collection, and it's the other color. So I have a black one and a white one now. Yay! And I bought them almost a decade apart from each other.
Yeah, not to mention you just get a brand new GameCube controller out of the deal, which is
brand new GameCube controller.
I love that still exists.
And it's just like, awesome.
Ooh. Time for some GameCube controller ASMR.
Those L and R buttons are snappy.
Can I hear the stick? Oh. The snapback of the GameCube stick. C stick isn't as good. That's the A button. Ooh.
Murph.
Love it.
What about you, buddy?
Today, actually, I just picked up Metroid Prime 3 Corruption because I have now successfully locked in a Switch 2 pre-order. That means I'm almost assuredly going to be buying Metroid Prime 4. So I'm like, hey, might as well get the game that I'm missing in the Metroid Prime series. So Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, saw it, was a good price. So I picked that up at Frank & Sons today. And yeah, it's basically all that there is. I haven't had a chance to play it, but looking forward to popping it in and seeing how it is.
That's awesome. I love 1 and 2. I remember like back in the day when the Wii was out, I think 3 was pretty expensive. Is it still expensive these days?
Trilogy was expensive. I know for a fact that the trilogy was.
Sure.
I think less so now, but I'm not super up to date on Wii prices, I'll be perfectly honest. For being a collecting channel, we're not very good at this knowing collecting prices off the top of our heads.
It's because we don't talk about prices. We just buy, consume.
Oh, it's true.
So I think that's all we've got for this episode, Murph. So I hope you have a lot of fun with that Metroid Prime 3 game, which is to say, happy gaming.
Yeah, and I hope you have a great time playing with your GameCube controller. And so I will also say, happy gaming. You gotta say bye bye.
Bye bye.